Hi, everybody. This is Cherie Mitchell. I am a disability civil rights activist and a self advocate from Atlanta, Georgia. A lot of you know me. I've been around a really long time. So I've had a lot of questions, and I got asked to talk some more about Olmstead. So, as many of you know, I was the person who oversaw Long Road Home. I was the committee chair for a very long time for People First of Georgia. And Long Road Home was about celebrating the Olmstead decision. So, what is the Olmstead decision? Well, the Olmstead decision was a decision by the Supreme Court that explained what the ADA meant. Because there was a lady by the name of Lois Curtis who was in a psych hospital, and the doctors determined that she could live in the community, but Georgia refused to provide her with services so she could live in the community. So she sued them under the ADA. It They won, and Georgia uh, did a appeal, and it went to the Supreme Court, and she won that too. And the Supreme Court basically said that people with disabilities should live in the most integrated setting, meaning they should be able to live in the community. Well, that's a law of the land. Like when you win a case like that with the Supreme Court, that becomes a law of the land. And the DOJ for a long time upheld those cases. And when people brought complaints to them about states not providing services in the community, they took them to court. So now the DOJ has decided that it does not mean that it's an integration uh, law, and they're not going to do that anymore. So that's raising all kinds of warning bells in my head. As a person with a disability, I feel like they're trying to take our disability civil rights away from us. So I wanted to make sure that people understood and got this. And I had so many questions based off of the other video I made. So let's talk about it. So the Department of Justice new interpretation of the ADA, what it can mean for community living and disability rights. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think the Department of Justice has the power to reinterpret a Supreme Court decision. So I think that there are ways to fight this. But it's going to take the disability community pulling together and doing what it takes to fight it. So the disability rights movement has worked to close institutions and expand independent living and ensure that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else to live in their own homes, work in their communities, attend church, raise families, and participate fully in society. Those efforts led to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 and the landmark Supreme Court decision in 1999 called Olmstead versus LC. LC standing for Lois Curtis, and Olmstead being the name of the man in charge of Human Services in Georgia at the state level. Recently, however, the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ, issued a legal opinion that questions the longstanding federal interpretation of the ADA's integration mandate. This has raised significant concerns throughout the disability community because it could affect how the federal government enforces the civil rights of millions of Americans with disabilities. Although the ADA and the Olmstead decision remains the law, many advocates believe that this shift in interpretation could weaken federal protections that have existed for more than 2 decades. And I got to tell you guys that with what has happened to the Department of Justice, it's a bit flustering. I mean, we used to could depend on the Department of Justice to fight for our rights, and now they won't. They're only going to fight for, in my opinion, the president's rights. So, and that's all they care about. They don't care about Americans. They don't care about Americans with disabilities. They just care about what the president wants. And that's a shame. It shouldn't be like that. And I think that we need to remember there's going to be a day after Trump. And when that day comes, the disability community needs to demand that in the future our rights are protected. A brief history of disability rights, such as much of the American history of people with disabilities were routinely segregated from society. Many individuals were placed in state institutions, nursing homes. Well, they're not really homes, they're nursing facilities, psychiatric hospitals, and intermediate care facilities, large residential campuses like group homes. Often those placements occurred simply because community services did not exist and because institutional care was medically necessary. Families frequently had no alternatives. People lost their ability to choose where they lived, who they lived with, where they worked, when they ate, and even when they went outside. So, and I'm going to tell you that it was not a good system of care. I mean, in most of these places, especially nursing facilities, for every 20 residents, you get one caregiver. And Money Follows the Person, which is a program that we fought for and came up with, and the disability community fought for and came up with the idea, is a program that helped people get out of these places, out of these congregated and segregated settings. And the thing about it was, over the last 20 years, I think, no, it's probably closer to 10 or 15 years that we've had Money Follows Person. The one thing that has come out of it is that it is proven that it is cheaper for people with disabilities to live in the community and pay their own rent and pay their own light bill. And excuse me, my phone is ringing. So, we've proven that it's cheaper to the system and to Medicaid that we live in the community, in our own homes. And it's a higher level of care. I mean, come on, think about it. One caregiver to one person instead of 20 people to one caregiver. That's a no-brainer. Absolutely, it's a higher quality of care. But unfortunately, um, with DOJ doing what they're doing, it's putting our rights at risk. And it leaves us, very few options for getting help. Because, like I said, in the past, DOJ were really good about standing up for people with disabilities' rights. So now what we have left are places like the P&As for each state, legal aid. So, if you're having a problem of that nature, reach out to either the P&A or legal aid in your area. So the disability rights movement challenged the belief that disability requires segregation. Instead, advocates argued that disability is a natural part of human diversity and that people with disabilities deserve the same freedoms and opportunities as everyone else. And I'm sure you're sitting there going, why should I care about this? Well, I got news for you. Um, every person will be a person of disability. You might be 95 before it happens, but you will one day be a person of disability. So, yeah, you're going to be me. And then you're going to really care about whether you get to stay in your home or be stuck in a nursing facility. Congress passed the ADA in 1990 to eliminate discrimination against people with disabilities. Now, I got to tell you something. When I first got involved in the disability community and first became a person of disability, I met a lady by the name of Kate Gaynor. And I heard her say this one time. She was speaking at a thing that they were holding where they were collecting stories about civil rights and fighting for civil rights. And this is what she said, and it struck me, and I've never forgotten it. And I think it's very poignant and to the point of what we're talking about now. She said, as an African American, she got the right to sit anywhere on the bus that she wanted in the 50s and 60s. But as a person of disability, she didn't get the right to get on the bus until 1990 with the passing and authorization of the Americans with Disabilities Act. That just blew my mind when she said it. Its purpose was not simply to prohibit discrimination in employment or public buildings. The ADA was intended to ensure equal opportunity, full participation, and independent living and economic self-sufficiency for people with disabilities. One of the ADA's most important principles is that public services should be delivered in ways that allow people with disabilities to participate fully in community life. Thus, we have the Olmstead decision, when poor Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson found themselves trapped in a psych ward, and the doctors were saying that they could live in the community with appropriate services, but the state of Georgia refused to do it. So, yeah, this is important, people. We need to be concerned and upset about what the DOJ has done. In 1999, the United States Supreme Court decided Olmstead versus LC. Two women with intellectual disabilities had been living in a Georgia psychiatric hospital. Medical professionals determined they could live successfully in the community with appropriate supports. Despite those recommendations, they remained institutionalized. The Supreme Court ruled that unnecessary institutionalization constitutes discrimination under the ADA, under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the court recognized that unnecessary segregation perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and it limits opportunities, and it isolates individuals and denies equal participation in society. The court concluded that when community services are appropriate, reasonably available, and do not fundamentally alter a state's programs, people with disabilities should receive services in community settings rather than institutions. This decision became the foundation of what is commonly known as the integration mandate. And this is what DOJ under Trump has decided they're no longer going to do. And it's wrong. We already know that it's cheaper to Medicaid to provide services, home and community-based services in the community. And we also know that it's a higher and better care than it would be in these nursing facilities or these state hospitals. So, we need to speak up. We need to be contacting our state legislators. I already have. I've already written an email to Hank Johnson. I've written an email to John Ossoff, and I've written an email to Raphael Warnock about these issues. I sent that out already. And you need to join me and email your legislators. So, what was the integration mandate that DOJ changed? The integration mandate required public entities to administer services in the most integrated settings appropriate to the needs of qualified individuals with disabilities. The most integrated setting means an environment where people with disabilities interact with people without disabilities to the fullest extent possible. And listen, I understand and get that a lot of people don't see my life as worth living. But I got to tell you, I think my life is worth living. I've helped hundreds of people to get out of nursing facilities and back into the community and to find the services they need. I have four grandsons and three sons. My life, I have a husband. My life is worth living. And I'm not going to let people take my life away from me because under the constitutions, I have the right to the pursuit of happiness. And I don't have to be locked away according to the Olmstead decision by the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter what DOJ wants to change it to now. They're wrong. They don't get to do that. And if we don't speak up, they will do that. So we need to start reaching out to those federal legislators and let them know this is unacceptable. And that we need a DOJ AG that will change back to helping and supporting people's with disabilities civil rights to integration in the community. Examples included living in one's own apartment. What in the world is that banging noise? Living with families, supported living, group homes integrated into neighborhoods, supported employment, community day programs, and personal attendance services, and home and community-based services. So these are the things that Olmstead has given us, and we don't want to lose those, because a lot of us can't live in the community if we don't have those services. So the goal is not merely to keep people out of institutions, it is to ensure that they have genuine opportunities to participate in community life. So that's Olmstead. Plain and simple. That's Olmstead. Now, I'm going to ask that you hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to do a video on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I've had questions from you guys about it, and the anniversary of the ADA is coming in July, and I'm going to do a video that explains the Americans with Disabilities Act and to help you understand why it's so important. So thank you for spending this time with me, and have a great week, guys.